to sit down with your team member if you can, even if it's, once a day for 15 minutes or once a week for 30 or 60 or whatever that is. It's like being intentional about it, just to give them a safe place to be able to just talk about what's ever on their mind. Maybe they're not in the right role.
Welcome to the Strategy with Jason podcast. Tune in for everything you need to know to stay in the know regarding the automotive industry. Here's your host, Jason Harris.
Hey, what's going on, Podcast Nation? It is Jason Harris here, and thank you for joining me on another episode of Strategy with Jason, where I get to talk about anything and everything I want to talk about when it comes to the automotive industry. Why? Because it's my show. No, I'm just kidding. Hey, we appreciate you guys. If you're out there watching, listening, we appreciate you taking the time to join us today. I am here with an amazing guest. I've been so excited to talk to this individual because we've known each other for a while. We've done a couple podcasts, and I'm just so excited to find out what he's been up to and how things are changing for him. I have the one, the only, the oh so famous Brandin Wilkinson. Brandin, what's up? How you doing?
Hey, buddy. Thank you for having me on again, Matt. I really appreciate it. I wasn't sure after the first couple if you're going to welcome me back or not, so I appreciate it. Thank you.
Dude, I love jamming with you, man, because we can talk about anything and everything when it comes to leadership. And look, I think last time me and you jammed, it was a super important and relevant time to be talking about leadership. But I think right now, even more so, man, coming off of what's happened over the last few years and now getting into a position where it's not enough just to be able to flip the light switch on in your dealership and make money. You actually have to kind of get back to, who are the leaders? How are they leading? And we're going to get into this day. So I'm stoked. I'm very, very stoked to be doing this with you.
Awesome.
But before we get down our rabbit holes, and I know we're going to find some fun ones today, I love kicking off these podcasts with a little origin story. Look, because I'm always fascinated. Look, no one wakes up one day and goes, I'm going to be in the automotive industry. That sounds amazing. So I'm always fascinated. So how people get into it. So let's start with that. What is the origin story, Brandin, of you getting into the automotive industry?
Sure. Definitely not a car guy. So grew up actually as a welder. So I joke kind of a little bit like I was born with a welder in my hand. That's kind of where my history lies. That's what my family had for their business. And then I was 22 years old. I remember going into a dealership, and the way the dealership was set up at that store is there's almost like a fishbowl. So it had a whole bunch of offices all collectively together inside the middle of the showroom. And so anyway, I was in there making small talk while my wife's vehicle was getting serviced, and I noticed that there was, out of the 6 offices, there's 4 of them that were dark. And so I'm talking to the salesperson, and like I got dirt on my hands. I'm in no way a salesperson at this point, and I still don't know, man, like what came over me at that time. And I think this is kind of a lesson in reflection that like really lean into your intuition. And we hear about follow your passion. I think to a degree your passion kind of finds you, and this is an example of that. Where I look at Troy, the salesperson, and I'm like, man, I see you have 4 offices that are empty. It's like, I could fill one of those for you if you want. And I'm just like, and he's like, yeah, man, let's do it. Like, we're actually looking for people. I'll go get my sales manager. And as he gets up, he's like literally getting up and going to get the sales manager. I'm just like, I start sweating. I'm like, what did I just do? Worked out, obviously, did really well. They were desperate. They hired me, gave me a shot, and had a great support system around me at that time to really, really get my career going. And everything happened really fast, dude. Like 22 years old. And then by the time I was 28, I partnered into a Chrysler store. And then I did that right up until actually signed off on the sale of the dealership in February of 2020, did a couple other things. And now I'm in a great position. It's something that I love to do. It's definitely a passion of mine. And I'm really fortunate because I'm with an incredible dealer group, an incredible family owned dealer group, and the Bannisters here in Kelowna, BC, and the partners are phenomenal, and the team around me is phenomenal. So I just feel super blessed to be the director of leadership and performance. And we just kind of got that kicked off at the start of September. So we're in the early stages of it, but excited to see what we can do with it. So that's in a nutshell awesome. My story.
I'm glad you stumbled your way into the automotive industry. And you know what? I'm going to share something with you. I remember when we first met, it was at a conference, I believe, in Vancouver. And I remember this because we somehow got invited, or we both got invited to the same dinner.
Yeah, that's right.
And we were at this dinner, and I remember we got into an argument. We did. We got into like a confrontational argument about operations, and I'm like, who is this guy? What is he?
Who does he think he is? Yeah.
But you know what? I think what it was is at the time, what you were pushing was quite progressive, and I think I was pushing back on that,
Right.
and it just goes to show that hey, relationships grow. Our friendship kind of grew. I was like, you know what?
Yeah.
Go back, but what I loved about you was you didn't back down. So I was aggressive in pushing back on you, and you were aggressive pushing back on me. And you know what? Honestly, I think that's the best thing ever. And I think that's kind of what this industry needs sometimes. We need, and I need it sometimes. I tell my team to push back on me. And I think, I know we've talked about this before, and I think that's one of many different signs of a good leader is that they can accept kind of this pushback, right? And still, be able to take away, bits and pieces of the information that was, look, I think at the end of the day, a good leader can learn anything from anybody, but that's a mindset that they need to get into. And I remember, so I'm going to admit something to you. When I first met you, my emotional intelligence, and that's our first topic today, is going to be EI, right? My emotional intelligence was not overly high. And, and I think when, we first talked and you were kind of laying out this kind of operational idea and stuff like that, I think my first, that's fucking stupid. Why did someone?
Well, in fairness, it probably was.
No, it wasn't. But it's since I've known you and I've gone through kind of this journey of, because look, dude, I'm a traditional OG car guy, right? It is suck it up, buttercup.
Yeah.
Suck it up, buttercup. Check it at the door. Shut the hell up and get back to work, right? Like that was my emotion, because that's how I got trained. Like I got trained like that. And but so many amazing things have happened to me since I've become more emotionally intelligent. But I want to get into this. This is my first question then for you is, first off, let's, in your words, define, emotional intelligence. And then also let's get into how that impacts, a dealership, on a daily basis.
Yeah. Well, first of all, man, just acknowledge you for going through your own sort of, if it's a mini transformation, let's call it, because I can relate, man. That's how I was when I first got going, because I didn't know any different. And that's how I was raised as well, is very much just suck it up. If you're not, you were scared to get caught not working hard in the shop. It's just the way that it was, and worried that you're going to get in trouble. There wasn't a lot of psychological safety. Not that I knew what that term was at the time, but it just wasn't there. And so that's the way that I was programmed. And I had to go through a really, I'll share it. Like I went through a really transformational process, both on a personal level and on a professional level. So the professional one was that it got to a point where the way that I was doing things just wasn't working. And it was, in the moment, it was very difficult, obviously, very challenging. I don't know if, humiliating to a degree, I would say. Like I had a mutiny on my hands from the sales team when I was a sales manager because of how I was doing things. There was a certain expectation that I had. It was, if I was pulling 12-hour shifts, then the expectation was that you were pulling 12-hour shifts. Like I had no patience or understanding or empathy for anything that was going on in your world outside of the dealership. And so that's just what I knew. It's all I knew, and that's how I lived it. And I thought, like, why wouldn't people want to do that? Look at me. I'm 24. In hindsight, it sounds so ridiculous, but like I'm 24. I'm a sales manager. We're doing 80 vehicles a month. Like we're crushing it. Like, why wouldn't you want to be in this position? And if you want to be in this position, then these are the steps you got to take, and you got to follow my lead with it. And that's how I viewed leadership. And I had it wrong on so many levels, and I didn't know that at the time. So anyway, went through a really hard conversation with the general manager at the time, and it was what a gift it was in hindsight, because he's like, look, Wilkie, you got to change spot or else you're gonna have a mutiny on your hands. And so right after that, like, went straight downstairs from the boardroom and pulled every single salesperson into the office, gave them that psychological safety. They were kind of confused at first, but I was like, hey, look, reassurance, there's absolutely nothing bad that's going to happen out of this conversation, only good. Safe to say whatever you want to say. And the first person I brought into the room and sat down, and he's like, well, you're an arrogant asshole. I was like, all right, noted. So that really started my the philosophy that I had about leadership. That was kind of the starting point. And
was that was your aha moment, right?
It was on a professional level. Yeah.
So I had a similar aha moment. Actually, it was kind of a funny one because I want to share it real quick. Then I want you to continue. But for Christmas, one of my staff members crocheted a pillow for me that said, "Shut the hell up and get back to work."
Oh, okay, got it.
And when I first received the present, I took it as this monster insults. And then I had a moment that's like, wow, I say that a lot.
Yeah.
So I had a similar aha moment. But go ahead, continue with your story. But I think everybody like that has to have that kind of aha moment to get into a mindset where they can kind of explore this journey of creating a emotionally safe place. So but go ahead. Bud.
Yeah, I think it's a trigger for transformation. So it was a blessing in hindsight and a gift, and I'm so grateful for it now. And again, like that started my professional transformation, and then that then led to my personal transformation. I started to understand myself better. I had no emotional control back in my 20s, nor did my dad. Like that's who I got a lot of my programming from, and bless him, and I love him and all that kind of stuff. And he did the best that he could with his programming, but it's just what it is. And so the way I look at, to circle back to the original question, the way that I look at emotional intelligence is really just your awareness around your emotions. And all an emotion is just energy in motion. And so we don't have to get soft about it. It's just, we hear about soft skills. It's, like what Simon Sinek talks about, and he frames it as they're not soft skills, they're human skills. And we need that, to your point earlier at the beginning of this conversation, that like we need that today more than ever. So we have to become adaptable, I find, as leaders, because there's a lot of change, and we've, as everybody knows, man, like we've in company, like think about how much change we've had to embrace over the last 3-4 years. I mean, I know
absolutely crazy.
You were sharing your story, and there's a lot of dealers that struggled through that process, and families that were inside the dealership, salespeople or advisors or whoever it is that struggled through that as well. And so we do have to embrace the humanity a little bit more, in my opinion, for that. And when I think about emotional intelligence, and I think about what you said about like I think you kind of framed it as though it starts with, the leader and leadership. And so my thought on leadership is really, I was sharing this story on another podcast recently. And so I have 2 books that are beside my bed, and I'll share, how I think about leadership and how it all ties together. So I have 2 books beside my bed. One of them is As a Man Thinketh by James Allen. And the reason why I like these 2 books is because they're only like 60 pages. So I'm not much of a physical reader anymore. It's more audio, but yeah. So anyway, James Allen, As a Man Thinketh. And then the other one is the Tao Te Ching. And I was reading that a few years ago and came across this passage in there, and it just hit me square between the eyes of like, yes, this is leadership, the way that I view leadership personally. And that's the cool thing is, man, like you'll have your definition for leadership, I'll have mine. And for the people listening to this, they'll have their own version of it. It's to make it, I think, your own. Like, I don't know that there is like one real definition, in my opinion.
Well, no, I'm with you. I don't think there's necessarily one definition, but I mean, this is why we started off the conversation though with emotional intelligence, because I don't think if I can't deploy empathy at scale across all situations, then I don't think I can effectively ever be a true leader. So even there may be variances as far as what we define leadership, I think at a core, if you aren't in sync with why you feel the way you're feeling, and then also the ability to empathize with people's thoughts, feelings, and perceptions, if you're not in a mindset, a place like that, then I don't think you can go on to that next step. And that's what we're talking about now is the mindset of a leader, right?
Right. Yeah. So if you don't understand yourself and the way your own emotions work, there's no way that you're going to be able to understand how they operate in others. So it starts there. And so just to finish the thought on leadership real quick, and then the mindset of leaders, is that the way that I look at leadership is from the Tao Te Ching is that one person becomes a model for others, one department for other departments, one dealership for other dealerships, one dealer group for other dealer groups, and one industry for all industries. And so if you really follow that thread, it's like I don't care about I don't give two shits about your title. It's like you're capable of being a great leader regardless of where you're at in the dealership. And it's because you have the ability to influence the whole department. And then that department influences the dealership to be better. And then that dealership influences their dealer group, and that dealer group influences another industry, and so on. And so that's the way that I process, and that's the way that I look at it. So if we aren't able to effectively lead ourselves first, it's going to be difficult to effectively lead others.
No, I totally agree, right? And I like the way we're kind of segmenting this out, because that's a perfect segue into having maintaining that mindset of a great leader. Look, it's funny. I think in our industry we can have moments of leadership, right? Like moments.
Yeah.
I think you saw a lot of that happen during COVID. I think
Yeah.
you saw some amazing operators have real true moments of leadership.
Yeah.
You saw a lot that did not.
Yeah.
But that's okay. That's sometimes what our industry needs. It needs a big shaking of the tree, to really see what fruit and leaves are going to stick, and the ones that are going to just kind of ultimately just fall off the tree. And I think our industry has kind of done that. But
Mhm.
now what I'm kind of seeing is, now since things are, I don't want to call it getting back to normal. That's a horrible way to come to it. But let's just say things are getting more competitive,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not, it's not as easy as just flipping on the light switch and, putting the open sign on. We're getting back to being a competitive industry again, both in new cars, used cars, service. Every department's getting more competitive, and I think, and this is what I want to get into our topic now is yes, we got great leaders, but then how do we get, the difference between teamwork and team building? Because ultimately, I think, that is what a good leader's always striving for, is to continue to kind of build the team, but then also have that strong foundation of teamwork. And I know you got some cool thoughts on this.
Yeah, so like teamwork and team building. So this is part of our leadership development program that we created inside the Bannister organization. So teamwork, like think about, it's easy to relate to sports, I guess, right? So like with
Mhm.
with teamwork, how do you have the fourth line contribute? How do you have the third line, if you're thinking about it in the realm of hockey? Fourth line contribute, third line contribute. Like everybody. Knows that they have a role. Like the fourth line, for example, is going to have a different role than the first line. So the
Yes.
first line is really designed to go and score goals. The fourth line is really to shut down. If they score a goal, that's a bonus. And so, first of all, I think it's just about the understanding of what our roles are inside the dealership. So, for example, if I'm just going to use it as a sales team as an example. So we're always going to have that 8 to 10 car person.
Yep.
It's just what it is, right? And then we're always going to have that 20 plus car person. It's just what it is. So, if we're only speaking, if we're only talking, there's a lot more to it, but if we're only talking in terms of strictly performance and selling cars in this example, then your first line player, so to speak, is your 20 plus car, and say your fourth line is that 8 car person. What I used to beat myself up on, and what drove me crazy, was like I always wanted to force that 8 car guy into a 20 car guy,
Of course.
because for a couple of reasons. One, I believe that they could, he or she, I believe that they were capable of doing that, and I just wanted to take the ownership of like helping them realize that and take them to that level. But it was always a frustrating process, because like they didn't want to get to that level. It's what I wanted. I was putting my self-imposed beliefs onto them, and there was always friction with it. And both of us were getting frustrated, and it was creating a negative environment. And then I had this realization about, the metaphor of first line on hockey to fourth line and everybody having a role. And so then we started to get an understanding of, for all of us on the team, like, hey, this is where you excel. This is where you add value. It may not be on the scoreboard, so to speak, as much, but you add value in many other ways, whether it's contributing to the culture or making the service clients feel really safe and welcome and warm when they come in, and just making small talk, like whatever those roles were, then we were able to get a lot more cohesive as a team. And it's funny because like the results just totally followed that. Like we, for example, at the GM store that I first started at, when I first started there, we were doing 25 units a month, and then we built it up to 80. And that was all through kind of a similar process. So,
well, look, not everybody can be the quarterback.
Right. Exactly. Well said. Yeah.
The other thing, can you imagine,
Yeah.
by the way, just how funny would this be? And the reason I'm thinking this, I just went to a Tennessee Volunteers game. Holy crap. College football, man, another level, right? Like,
yeah, but I've heard it's crazy.
It's insane. I have like the Titans, the stadium's not too far from me. It's just down the street, right? Well, I'll tell you right now, that Volunteer Stadium is almost twice the size, right? But
Yeah.
I can just picture if I went to that game that I just went to, and there was nothing but quarterbacks. God, that would be for an incredibly awkward, awkward, very boring, weird game to watch. If people aren't necessarily playing the roles that they're supposed to play to effectively, as a team, get to the end zone, that would be a super awkward game. But you're right, though. Our industry doesn't do that. What do we want? We want nothing but quarterbacks. We want all Peyton Mannings on our team. We want superstars. Everyone has to be a superstar. But, that takes. I think to get to that stage requires some pretty effective communication, because how do you effectively communicate such a strategy in the sense that it doesn't sound negative, but ultimately end up building culture? And I know you guys have thoughts on how we can execute that. Yeah.
So like when it comes to communication, the first thing typically that we think of is just, I'll just like put it out there for people to consider, but it's like when you hear the word communicate, what comes to mind? And for me, like it's for a long time, it was verbalizing, it was talking, but actually the key to great effective communication is listening. That's where it starts. And, there's really 3 different levels to active listening. And man, I don't know, I can't say this with certainty because I haven't been inside all the dealerships. I don't know all the, the dealers in the world and stuff like that. So it wouldn't be fair for me to assume this, but I would say that there's probably an opportunity for us to become better at listening to our team, like listening to what isn't being said, listening to their body language, listening to their tonality, like just really being as present with them as we possibly can. Because what happens, I find, in the retail space is like we get so consumed by what's going on around us. There's so much activity, there's so much stimulus that it's so difficult for us to be able to actually just slow down and hear what the other person's trying to say without saying it in some instances. And then I think what happens is through the active listening process, that's going to elicit better quality questions from us. That's just going to arise naturally through the better we listen. And then what happens from there is that the better questions we ask, the better answers we're going to get, and the cycle kind of continues. And I think the best way to do this is to sit down with your team member if you can. Like, I know this is going to sound like a lot, but even if it's once a day for 15 minutes or once a week for 30 or 60 or whatever that is, it's like being intentional about it, just to give them a safe place to be able to just talk about what's ever on their mind. Maybe they're not in the right role. Maybe they're trying and forcing themselves to be a quarterback, but in reality, they're a running back. So not a big step backwards by any means, but maybe just a pivot that needs to happen. And for both of us to understand like where the expectations are from that point going forward. And so I would say that the process would be intentional one-on-one time, really, really be present with them as best you can, active listening. That will lead to better questions. Better questions will lead to better answers, and then better results from that. That's the way I look at it.
No, look, you're 100% right. I mean, I know we're getting towards the tail end of our conversation, and I'm confident we could easily go a whole another hour, on these topics. But you're right. If we can't effectively communicate in a safe and
That's key. That's key.
I'm using the word safe, right? I'm trying to figure out how I want to contact, but no, you're right. It has to be communicated in a safe way that it doesn't come out in this negative way. And unfortunately, I find our industry will communicate this by just changing a pay plan. And that's a horrible thing. You're laughing, but you know I'm right.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah. Yeah.
It's just, like, it's just good, effective communication. It takes a little bit more time. It takes a little bit more face-to-face, a little more eye contact.
Totally.
But for everyone to have the same goal, I need everyone to be on the same page and working towards the ultimate strategy. But if I'm not communicating that effectively to them, how am I ever going to get to a place? Look, Brandon, I know that we could definitely continue this conversation. We'll go way beyond it. And I think we are. We're going to have to do a part 2. 100% we're going to do a part 2 on this one.
We'll see what the audience says.
We'll see it now. Speaking of the audience, for everybody out there watching and listening right now who don't know maybe too much about you or like to learn more or connect with you, follow along with your journey, what's the best way to connect with you?
LinkedIn, man. That's where I spend the majority of my time, is just on there. So what you'll find in my feature section as well is, I have a newsletter that comes out every Saturday that I've really designed specifically for automotive leaders, managers, anyone really in the automotive space with, like relevant stories that they'll be able to relate to and some strategies and things like that as well. Have my book on there that we talked about before, Rethink Selling. And then also just a cool little ebook. It's a 66 pager, no email required. Just click the link and then it'll pop up for you on your computer and be ready for you to download. So that's it.
I really appreciate your passion for our industry. I appreciate your commitment to cultivating, better leaders in our industry. And what? I am so glad that we ran into each other so many years ago at the dinner and had an argument because we get to continue to have conversations like this. Hey, Brandon, this has been a lot of fun, man. So thank you so much for taking the time to jam with me. You have yourself an amazing day, sir. Thank you.
You too, buddy. I appreciate you. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to the Strategy with Jason podcast with your host, Jason Harris. Don't want to miss new content? Be sure to check out the full podcast library at strategywithjason.com to stay in the know. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Happy